You begin to see that life was never random. What once felt like detours now reveal themselves as necessary paths. The disappointments that lingered for decades soften into understanding. You recognize that success, as you once defined it, was incomplete without meaning. This realization does not arrive with noise or drama. It arrives calmly, like autumn light through a familiar window, illuminating what has always been there. You have lived long enough to know that the loud promises of earlier decades rarely delivered what they claimed. You chased goals because you were told they mattered, only to discover later that some victories felt strangely hollow. Yet even that was not wasted. It was preparation. Like climbing a mountain, only to realize the view matters more than the summit. You now understand that striving was never the destination, it was the shaping. Socrates observed that the unexamined life is not worth living. What he pointed toward was not criticism of living, but an invitation to reflect. With decades behind you, examination becomes possible without self-deception. You can finally see your life whole, not as isolated successes and failures, but as a coherent journey that makes sense in hindsight. The years have taught you what no book, teacher, or mentor could fully explain. You learned patience, not from advice, but from wading through seasons that refused to hurry. You learned discernment by trusting the wrong people and surviving the cost. You learned compassion through loss, loss of loved ones, loss of roles, loss of certainty. These lessons were not gentle, but they were thorough. Time has seasoned you the way weather shapes stone, slowly, persistently, without asking permission. Sharp edges have been softened. What remains is solid. You understand people now not by what they say, but by what they avoid, repeat, or defend. You've watched patterns unfold across decades and recognized truth beneath performance. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is the wisdom of years. You have faced your own shadows, your regrets, your unanswered questions, and instead of weakening you, this awareness has deepened your humanity and steadied your judgment. You no longer feel compelled to explain yourself to everyone. You no longer need approval to validate your worth. The years have granted you authority, not borrowed authority, but earned authority. You trust your instincts because they have been tested by life itself. At this stage of life, opportunity looks different. It no longer announces itself with urgency or excitement. It speaks quietly, asking for intention rather than effort. You understand, as only experience can teach, the true value of time. You know what drains you and what restores you. You choose carefully now, not because options are fewer, but because clarity is greater. This is the freedom that comes after illusion fades. You are no longer distracted by every possibility. You act deliberately. When you say yes, it is meaningful. When you say no, it is final. You are not driven by impulse, but guided by perspective. Viktor Frankl wrote, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure." You have learned this truth firsthand. The passing pleasures no longer satisfy, but meaning still does. Purpose still does. Contribution still does. The decades behind you have prepared you for this season, not to rush forward, but to move with precision. This is not urgency born of fear. It is urgency born of understanding. You know there is work worth doing, conversations worth having, wisdom worth passing on. Whether you intended it or not, you have been shaping a legacy all along. In your work ethic, your endurance, your mistakes corrected and lessons learned, something lasting has been formed. Legacy is not created at the end of life, it is revealed there. Now, with awareness, you can refine it. Legacy is not monuments or applause. It is quieter than that. It lives in the people you influenced without realizing it, in the children who watched how you handled difficulty, in colleagues who learned integrity by observing you, in friends who found steadiness in your presence. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, what we do now echoes in eternity. At this stage of life, you understand that eternity is not abstract. It lives in impact, in memory, in values transferred quietly from one life to another. You've lived long enough to know that legacy is not about perfection. It is about consistency, about showing up honestly, about leaving people better than you found them. Albert Einstein once reflected, learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. The harvest of your years allows all three to coexist. You carry yesterday's lessons, live today with clarity, and offer tomorrow something meaningful. The harvest of your years is ready. What remains now is not striving, but understanding its deeper meaning and deciding how to share what you have so carefully grown. With the wisdom of experience, life takes on a different shape. You understand now that meaning was never found in constant motion, but in reflection. The view from this stage reveals patterns you could not see while climbing. When you were in the thick of responsibility, raising families, building careers, surviving setbacks, there was little time to step back. Now, with decades behind you, the distance allows clarity. You recognize that every chapter, even the painful ones, contributed to the whole. Nothing was accidental. Nothing was wasted. The road curved where it needed to curve, and every bend taught you something essential. You have lived long enough to know that life does not explain itself in the moment. Understanding arrives later, like a harvest gathered only after the growing season has ended. The harvest of your years is rich and varied, shaped by seasons of abundance and seasons of scarcity. It includes hard-won insights earned through persistence, quiet victories that never made headlines, and lessons purchased at great personal cost. These are not ideas borrowed from others. They are truths verified by experience. You have gathered stories that carry weight because they were lived, not imagined. Like a seasoned tree that has stood through storms and droughts, your roots run deep. You have endured economic uncertainty, personal loss, changing roles, and shifting identities. Each year added a ring to your understanding. What you offer now has substance and nourishment because it has been tested by time. Younger generations may have speed, but you have depth. You know that endurance often matters more than brilliance, and consistency more than talent. Aristotle once observed that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. This truth becomes unmistakable with age. Looking back, you see that your life was shaped less by dramatic moments and more by daily choices, showing up when it was difficult, doing what was necessary rather than what was easy. The harvest you now hold is the result of those repeated acts performed quietly over decades. This is the season when you finally appreciate what you have grown, not with pride, but with gratitude. You see your life as a field that has produced something real. You understand what the young cannot yet grasp, that wisdom unused is wisdom wasted. Knowledge kept to oneself eventually withers, but wisdom shared multiplies. Your experience serves a greater purpose when it is offered, sometimes through words, sometimes simply through presence. You no longer feel the need to convince or impress. Your contribution comes from authenticity, not volume. The world does not need you to be louder. It needs you to be real. In a time filled with noise, your calm carries authority. In a culture obsessed with novelty, your steadiness offers reassurance. Your authority comes not from titles, but from having lived long enough to know what lasts when everything else falls away. Confucius taught, that wisdom, compassion, and courage are the three universally recognized moral qualities of men. Decades of living reveal how these qualities mature together. Wisdom teaches discernment, compassion softens judgment, and courage allows you to speak truth when silence would be easier. These qualities make your contribution irreplaceable. Whether you mentor quietly, guide within your family, or simply model integrity in everyday life, your influence reaches further than you may realize. People learn from how you handle disappointment, how you speak about the past, and how you face the future. Your life has become a lesson, even when you are unaware of it. This season is not about starting over. It is about bringing things full circle. You are not erasing the past, you are integrating it. Unfinished dreams may return now, not demanding urgency, but inviting completion. They arrive differently, without pressure, without illusion, asking only for honesty and attention. You can now integrate who you were with who you have become. The ambitious builder and the reflective elder meet within you, forming a wholeness that younger years could not support. There is peace in this integration, a sense of alignment between past effort and present understanding. You are no longer divided between who you thought you should be and who you truly are. Carl Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This privilege often unfolds later in life. After decades of adapting to roles and expectations, you finally stand close to your authentic self. Completion is not about finishing tasks, it is about reconciling your inner life with your outer story. You may feel a quiet satisfaction now, not because everything was perfect, but because it was honest. That honesty is the truest form of completion. You stand at a meaningful threshold. The chapters you've written have brought you here to perhaps the most important chapter yet. You have lived long enough to recognize true purpose when you see it. Purpose now feels less like ambition and more like alignment, less like striving and more like stewardship. Viktor Frankl reminded us that life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. At this stage, meaning becomes the organizing principle of life. You choose relationships, commitments, and actions based on significance, not reward. You shape your remaining years with intention, understanding that time is precious precisely because it is finite. Albert Einstein once reflected, "A life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving." You understand now that movement does not always mean speed. Sometimes it means thoughtful steps, deliberate choices, and measured progress toward what truly matters. The harvest of your years is not only for you, it is meant to be passed on through stories, values, examples, and presence. What you have gathered across decades becomes a gift to others. Long after individual achievements fade, the wisdom you share will continue its quiet work. This is not an ending, it is fulfillment. A life brought into focus, a harvest ready to nourish generations beyond your own.